Hello everybody. If you want to read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you. Short story 412, The Whispering Woods. Intermediate. The village of Black Hollow was a quiet place, surrounded by dense, dark woods. The trees were so tall that their tops seemed to touch the clouds, and their branches twisted together like bony fingers. The villagers rarely ventured into the woods, especially after sunset. They called it the Whispering Woods, and they said it was cursed. Emma had just moved to Black Hollow. She was a young woman, eager to start a new life away from the noise of the city. She didn't believe in curses or ghost stories. To her, the woods were just trees, and the whispers were nothing more than the wind. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma decided to take a walk. The air was cool, and the village was quiet. She followed a narrow path that led into the woods. The further she went, the darker it became. The trees seemed to close in around her, their shadows stretching long and thin across the ground. At first, the woods were peaceful. Birds chirped softly, and the leaves rustled in the breeze. But as Emma walked deeper, the sounds began to change. The birds stopped singing. The wind grew colder, and then she heard it, a faint whisper. Emma. She froze. The voice was soft, almost like a sigh, but it was unmistakable. It had said her name. She looked around, but there was no one there. Just the trees standing silent and still. It's just the wind, she told herself, though her heart was pounding. She took a deep breath and kept walking. The whispers grew louder. Emma, stay. This time the voice was clearer. It sounded sad, almost pleading. Emma's hands trembled as she clutched her jacket tighter. She turned around, ready to head back to the village. But the path behind her was gone. The trees had shifted, their branches blocking her way. Panic set in. She tried to run, but the ground seemed to pull at her feet, as if the earth itself wanted to keep her there. The whispers surrounded her now, coming from all directions. Emma, don't leave us. She stumbled forward, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The woods were alive, the trees creaking and groaning as they moved. Shadows danced in the corners of her vision, shapes that seemed almost human but weren't quite right. Then she saw it, a figure standing between the trees. It was tall and thin, its body twisted like the branches around it. Its face was pale, its eyes black and empty. It reached out a hand, its fingers long and bony. Emma, it whispered. She screamed and turned to run, but the figure was faster. It moved without sound, its feet barely touching the ground. Emma's leg burned as she pushed herself to go faster, but no matter how hard she ran, the figure was always just behind her. Finally, she burst into a clearing. The moonlight shone down, illuminating a small, ancient well in the center. The whispers stopped. The figure was gone. Emma collapsed by the well, her chest heaving. She looked down into the dark, endless hole and felt a strange pull, as if the well was calling to her. She leaned closer, peering into the darkness. And then she saw them, faces, pale and ghostly, staring up at her from the depths. Their mouths moved in unison, their voices echoing in her mind. Join us! Emma stumbled back, her heart racing. She turned and ran, not stopping until she reached the edge of the woods. The village was just ahead, its lights glowing warmly in the distance. When she finally reached her cottage, she locked the door and collapsed onto the floor. She told herself it was just her imagination, that the woods were just woods and the whispers were just the wind. But that night as she lay in bed, she heard it again. A soft, sad whisper coming from outside her window. Emma, we're waiting. She pulled the blanket over her head and closed her eyes, but she knew she would never sleep soundly again. The next morning the villagers found her cottage empty. The door was wide open, and her footprints led straight into the woods. They searched for days, but Emma was never seen again. And if you walk through the whispering woods at night, you might hear her voice, soft and sad, joining the others. Stay! Don't leave us! Vocabulary notes. Dense, meaning thick and closely packed together, difficult to see through or move through. Example from the story. The village of Black Hollow was a quiet place, surrounded by dense, dark woods. Similar words: thick, heavy, crowded, compact. Usage tip, often used to describe forests, fog, or crowds. Example, the fog was so dense that I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Twisted, meaning bent or turned in an unnatural way, distorted. Example from the story. The trees were so tall that their tops seemed to touch the clouds, and their branches twisted together like bony fingers. Similar words: curved, coiled, contorted, warped. Usage tip, can describe physical objects like branches or abstract things like thoughts. Example, the old tree's roots were twisted and gnarled. Venture, meaning to go somewhere that might be dangerous or unknown. Example from the story. The villagers rarely ventured into the woods, especially after sunset. Similar words: explore, dare, risk, journey. Usage tip, often used when talking about going into unfamiliar or risky places. Example, few people venture into the desert alone. Whisper, meaning to speak very quietly, often in a way that is hard to hear. Example from the story. They called it the Whispering Woods, and they said it was cursed. Similar words: murmur, mumble, hiss, mutter. Usage tip, can be used as a noun, a whisper, or a verb, to whisper. Example, she whispered a secret into her friend's ear. Horizon, meaning the line where the earth seems to meet the sky. Example from the story. One evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma decided to take a walk. Similar words: skyline, edge, boundary. Usage tip, often used to describe sunsets or sunrises. Example, the ship disappeared over the horizon. Rustle, meaning a soft crackling sound made by things like leaves or paper moving. Example from the story. Birds chirped softly and the leaves rustled in the breeze. Similar words: crinkle, swish, murmur. Usage tip, often used to describe natural sounds. Example, the wind rustled the pages of the book. Pleading, meaning begging or asking for something in a desperate way. Example from the story. It sounded sad, almost pleading. Similar words: begging, imploring, beseeching. Usage tip, often used to describe a tone of voice or expression. Example, she gave him a pleading look, hoping he would stay. Creak, meaning a sharp, high-pitched sound made by something old or not well oiled. Example from the story. The woods were alive, the trees creaking and groaning as they moved. Similar words: squeak, groan, screech. Usage tip, often used to describe sounds made by doors, floors, or trees. Example, the old wooden floor creaked under his feet. Illuminating, meaning lighting up or making something visible. Example from the story. The moonlight shone down, illuminating a small ancient well in the center. Similar words: brightening, lightening, highlighting. Usage tip, can be used literally, light, or figuratively, making something clear. Example, the teacher's explanation was illuminating and helped me understand the topic. Echo, meaning a sound that repeats because it bounces off a surface. Example from the story. their voices echoing in her mind. Similar words: reverberate, resonate, repeat. Usage tip: often used to describe sounds in large empty spaces. Example: her laughter echoed through the empty hallway. Collapse, meaning to fall down suddenly, often because of weakness or exhaustion. Example from the story: Emma collapsed by the well, her chest heaving. Similar words: fall, crumble, faint. Usage tip: can be used for people, buildings, or systems. Example: after running the marathon, he collapsed onto the ground. Ancient, meaning very old, often from a time long ago. Example from the story: the moonlight shone down, illuminating a small ancient well in the center. Similar words: old, antique, aged, historic. Example: the ancient ruins were over 1,000 years old. Footprints, meaning marks left by a person's foot on the ground. Example from the story: the door was wide open and her footprints led straight into the woods. Similar words: tracks, steps, impressions. Usage tip: often used in detective stories or to show someone's path. Example: the detective followed the footprints in the snow. Soundly, meaning deeply or completely, often used with sleep. Example from the story: she knew she would never sleep soundly again. Similar words: deeply, peacefully, heavily. Usage tip: often used to describe how someone sleeps. Example: after the long hike, he slept soundly all night. Story written by DeepSeek AI. Image created by ImageFX AI. To read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you.